17th, 2025, here in House Transportation after the floor. We've got a little bit of time here. I jumped the gun a little bit in terms of miscellaneous DMV, but also trying to learn a little bit more about Vermont's ATV Association, and then the issue with the width rule on the ATVs and the DMV. I suppose that's exercising my few times I try to exercise my chair authority. This is a big issue for people up in Franklin County. Their ATVs are near and dear to their hearts. So I did jump the gun a little bit on the witness testimony before hearing the DMV's position on it. But anyway, that's where we're at, and that's why we're here now. So Tommy O'Connor with the Vermont ATV Sportsman Association. Welcome to the committee. I don't think you've been here since we've been together. But I am Matt Walker, and I represent Swanton and Sheldon, which is right next to Highgate, which is at the epicenter of a lot of these.
Tim Walker from Bennington.
Kate Lally from Shelburne. Molly Burke, Brattleboro. Chloe Tomlinson, Winooski.
Jim Casey, Hubbardton, Addison, Rutland 1.
Patty McCoy serving Pulteney, Ira, and part of West.
Chris Keyser, Rutland City.
Candace White, Waitsfield, Warren, Moretown, Facein, Duxbury.
Ken Wells, Orleans County 3, and we love ATVs too.
Phil Pouch, Heinsberg.
And for the record, Tommy O'Connor. So what we have, thank you, Mr. Chair, for having us in. A quick introduction to VASA, just in case those who are not familiar with it. And then we were also asked to talk about legislative priorities, with being one of the main questions. So I'll go through this. I do have a spot for questions, but I'm also happy if at any point, feel free to stop me and let me know. So quickly on me, I joined VASA in June of 2023. I also serve as the vice chair of Vermont Trails and Greenways Council, which is a large association of multiple trail associations across the state. And in there, I oversee their actual legislative and policy. So I'm up to date on a lot of fun stuff, get to spend a lot of time in this great building. And then in the fall of 2024, Governor Scott did approve my nomination to be the motorized rep to VOREC. That's the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative. So I've been sitting with them, and I was also, through that group, part of the team that worked on the SCORP. So that Move Forward Together Vermont. If you've been hearing that language, I was one of the technical advisory committee members. Prior to this, I was the executive director over at Farm Bureau. So I've been doing kind of nonprofit for a while, and then I was in the education sector up until that wonderful thing we call COVID. So there is one change to this slide that I did this morning because I missed it. I will point it out. But to let you know what VASA is, we are a member-based association that manages ATV, and SXS is side by side the network here in Vermont. The second bullet is the new one that I did, unfortunately, about in the one I shared with the committee. We have 24 active clubs statewide. They range in membership and range in network mileage. And I'll go through a couple of those clubs here in a little bit to give you a sense. We host just under 1,000 miles. We say that we do have one club that should be coming online this year with some new mileage down in the center part of the state. And then also we're finishing opening up from the July 2023 floods. We still have a couple networks that are either partially offline or fully offline. One of those being Hardwick. That one ended up fully offline for safety reasons. So there's a lot of grant work going into that network first to try to get that back open. And a majority of our trails are hosted by private landowners. So we're very thankful for them. And we have a whole slide calling them out as well later. We also hold educational classes for riders that need to complete the youth safety course, similar to VAST. If you are under the age of 18 and have, by Vermont statute, the ability to operate these, you're also supposed to take the youth safety course. I'll go into that a little bit too. We want a really nice grant that we're finishing up right now to make it free for several users to take it online, but we also offer in-person classes as well. And that last bullet is one of our favorite ones. We are responsible for the maintenance of the trails, and we host a great trails team and construction equipment. We did a lot of work when I was hired in 2023 to bolster our budget to support that work. So we now have 2 full-time trail technicians and 1 part-time that just joins us for the construction season. And our trails coordinator, Ethan Hill, who runs all of this, is also on the national board of NOVAC, which I'll introduce you to quickly, but has worked on several of these trails and knows them in and out. So he's a very valuable resource. So to break it down real quick on some numbers here. So this is last year. This was last riding season. 5,704 members is based on machines. That's how many machines were registered to get trail access decals to ride. The average age of the owner was 51 years. We're seeing a lot of folks that are in retirement age, but also we're hearing a lot more grandparents who have some mobility concerns are using that to engage with their grandchildren and go on fun rides. A couple of our clubs actually do those and host grandparent rides. It's really neat. The top right is a quick breakdown of our largest state contributions. Obviously, Vermont taking up the bulk of it, but Connecticut, Mass, New Hampshire, New York are the next four, and those numbers fluctuate, each year that we've done research. But again, last year, Connecticut and Mass had a very healthy representation here coming up to Vermont. A lot of them are second homeowners or doing Airbnbs and vacations. Bottom left, the top 5 clubs in membership. Borderline is our largest, and that is up in Newport, and it has always been our largest, and it's not even close, as you can tell. 1,263 members last year. Next is the Top of the World system over in Concord. Then Green Mountain ATV, which actually has Hyde Park as their base, but they have trails all the way through Eden that connect into Lowell, which becomes Borderline, and then over towards Johnson. They have a network there. Northwest Vermont Wheelers is next. They're up in Enosburg. They're also part of the Highgate group that's doing a lot of work there. And then Jack Pines Pirates down in Reedsboro. They're 5th largest, but they're also one of our more active ones with a lot of the events that they do. So fun stuff like that. And then to just break down the 3 main types of machines, we see a traditional ATV, the sit upon top, the 2-seat side-by-side, and then the 4-seat. The 2-seat side-by-side is the popular, like a Ranger, or kind of like a lot of people see it as like a utility vehicle on farming, things like that. That is our #1 registered type of machine. So we have a fair amount of partners, but I wanted to highlight 6 real quick. We already talked about Vermont Trails and Greenways, so I'll kind of skip over them. But NOVAC up front is the National Association of Off-Highway Vehicles, which is all encompassing. So that's not just ATVs, side-by-sides. They have a motorcycle component. They have dirt bikes. That's a very large organization. They do a national conference that we attend, which has a lot of professional development. Our trails coordinator, as I said, does sit on their board, represents private landowner conversations. This past year, we were up in Minnesota and we worked with Polaris a lot. They are the ones who hosted us and did a great presentation for all of us, which was a lot of learning, but it was really great. I mentioned the safety course. So Yamaha had a grant program that made the online version of the safety course for youth free. We have through the first week of June still, so we're still accepting applications for families and young riders to take that course and to be at no cost to them. And that's been a great partnership because we now have just over half of our allotment has been used. So we've seen a lot of riders get ready for it. Polaris Ride Command is a mapping app. It's free for anybody. You can literally right now pull up your phone and download it and have access to it. I'll show you what it looks like so you can have a sense. But as Polaris is growing, and particularly their Ride Command function is growing, they're also seeing the need to support back to these associations. So they also take care of a lot of grant writing and support. And one of the things they did this past year for us is a additional round of funding to put out our helmet signage. As per the statute, you're required to wear a helmet. So now we doubled our helmet signage in our networks thanks to that application. Quickly, Axle Off-Road is just an off-road apparel site, but they have helmets. And we've now entered our 2nd year of partnership for our members, 10% off helmets if you're a current member of VASA. And it's a gentleman who started out of his garage and is kind of a budding entrepreneur and wanted to partner with a good nonprofit. So we've signed on and we're very pleased with them. Tread Lightly is kind of the Leave No Trace version of off-roading. So we do a lot of work with them and follow that. And that feeds all of our trail condition work, our trail maintenance work, and all that fun stuff. And then, of course, Vermont Trails and Greenways sitting on the board, but we go through a lot of the issues. Most recently was, of course, the big flooding events and how all these trail networks are working in there. The next slide is all about law enforcement.
Sorry, Tom,
Yeah.
I got one.
I certainly can.
Tread lightly.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more? That was the #1 complaint about ATVs and on lands and on pieces and tearing up trails, et cetera. That was back years ago. Progress wise, and what that sort of has or has not been working in relationship to opening up new trails and.
Yeah, great question. So Tread Lightly is, I also am a big hiker, so the Leave No Trace. So they're conversations are always around proper riding techniques. So first and foremost, making sure that you're in the right gear. So if you're in four-wheel drive, so you're using all your tires with the same amount and you're not doing essentially like a burnout or a kick out. That was doing a lot of damage to the trail. So they're talking first and foremost how to properly ride, how to properly engage your machine. They do education also on, of course, trail conditions. We know that just because it's a beautiful day out doesn't mean it didn't rain a couple of days ago and you have really soft spots that shouldn't be used. So they also look at trail conditions, and their whole promotional material, that's the word I'm looking for, that they put out is literally banked on all these different minute pieces. The way they've grown, which is very helpful to us, is they produce all those things that we can then put out on our trails. So a lot of our trails have sensitive area marking. So that may mean even if there's a speed limit that allows them to go 30, sensitive areas 25 and below, that could be based on, again, what's happening with the actual water flow. That could be anything related to loose gravel that we don't want kicking up, fun stuff like that. And then Tread Lightly also does online, like I wouldn't call them webinars, but essentially training. So it's another thing we push as you become a new rider, get acquainted with that because it teaches you the proper riding techniques to limit damage to trails. They're also part of, and I can go into because it kind of goes into the width discussion that I know is part of the miscellaneous bill. They do a lot of research on the safety of the machines themselves. And one of the things that we'll talk quickly about in the width conversation is a little bit of width change has created stable machines, but it's also dispersed the weight differently. So it's also creating less structural damage on the trails, which is falling right in line with Tread Lightly. So it's a mix of us telling them, hey, these are concerns we have, and then them also going to manufacturers saying, how can we help all these different groups that are either riding associations or down out west is a lot of Bureau of Land Management and federal land. So is that clarified? Yeah, of course. Law enforcement's really big for us. We primarily work with our game wardens. They are our largest budget line when it comes to law enforcement. They're also the greatest resource for us because they're automatically statewide. And what we do with them that's most important is going to be that third bullet. Any contact they make, similar to if a regular law enforcement officer finds you on the road and makes contact with you and it's noted and there's statistics around that, we have the same thing. We get monthly reports that says we were at these locations, we had, let's say, 20 contacts and we had to give 3 warnings for this, citations for this, things like that. That's really helpful for us because we take that information, get it to any clubs that may be in the area. If it's an area where we don't have a club, we try to get it to the town that this is happening to let them know this is what's happening. So we can try to, again, we want it safe first and foremost, but we also want to be very respectful of riders. That's the most important thing. If networks are going to grow, you want to be in the good graces of all the great landowners and people around there. So we have that. And if we don't have a warning contact or a spot that they want additional law enforcement, we also carry enough to support sheriff's offices. And last year we had one municipality, the town of Morrisville, helped us out with our Green Mountain ATV group out of Johnson Hyde Park, just due to some sheriff staffing issues at Lamoille County. So this year we're doing the same thing. We're currently in conversations with Fish and Wildlife, writing our contract, getting ready to go. And what we're learning from Fish and Wildlife is they're going to bolster some patrols for us, which is helpful. So we're going to probably be tailoring down our sheriff budget, but still have it access. We have a few sheriff offices that have already expressed interest in taking part in this. So that's very helpful for us. Here's our big thing, our trail maintenance. This is our largest budget line item, is maintaining those 1,000 miles. We have several pieces of construction equipment, as you can see above picture. We have, skid steer style. We have our dump trucks. We also have excavators. We have a whole bunch of different pieces of equipment that are going to be used depending on what we need for those trail work. The maintenance is done in accordance with the NOVAC Great Trails program. To touch on that real fast, that is a nationally accredited program that does research constantly of what's the best way to either lay material, choose material. They change things from, it used to be build a bridge, then it was, let's do culverts, let's go back and forth. So they're constantly doing what's in the best interest. So we're always working with them to learn how do we handle, particularly when we get to areas that have high erosion concerns, things like that. The great thing with that is that the state of Vermont has also signed on to accept that as the national standard to be here at the state. Our BMP is always reviewed to the best management practice. We internally review. So I always look at my trail coordinator. What's the thing you're learning? We did a big project last year up in Lowell by the wind tower and got to a couple spots, and it was questions for me learning, going, why do we do it this way? Why do we put material this way? And it's all in that Great Trails workshop. The other great thing we just found out is that we have a grant that we just earned from the Recreational Trails Program, or RTP. And we're going to be able to do a new round of Great Trails Workshop for our clubs this year at no cost. So we're going to get more clubs up to date on why we're doing what we're doing. And they're going to be trained trail technicians so they can support their clubs if we're not in the area at that time. The trail access, oh, look at that wonderful grammar problem. It's a decal program, not a deval, sorry. So funding is supported through that. And then, of course, the RTP grant program. The RTP grant program is, of course, Agency of Transportation on the federal side, and it works its way down through Forest Parks and Rec. And we also this year won a very substantial grant from VORAC to do the flood recovery. If you're not familiar, VORAC has usually, most cases, a 3-track opportunity for funding. When the floods happened in July of 23, they added a 4th in flood recovery. We were one of the recipients of flood recovery. That's going to work on 3 trail networks to get them back open at as close to 100% as we can. They're 3 of our more popular networks. As I mentioned, we have 3 employees with specialized training and their required professional development. And we have won some national awards, particularly for our work down in the National Forest in the Bennington area. We are in the process of another contract conversation with the National Forest. They like the work that was done and they want us to come back. So we're doing some work around there and how we can do it. So to give you a quick sense, this is a very possibly confusing image. This is what the Ride Command application looks like, very far zoomed out. I wanted just to kind of briefly show roughly our trail network. Real quick, the dotted red and green means closed. So and this is live time. We update this each day as we can do it. We can change a whole section or we can shut down a whole network. And in the northern part, anywhere you see one of those little ATV symbols, that's representing a club in their network. So you see we have Newport, Irisburg, Sheffield, all of those. And right now, obviously, they're all closed. We do not open till at least after May 1st, and we still have dry out at that point. And then in the southern part, you again see a few more of those. And what I decided to do to help you out is I zoomed in. This is just out north of Ira. This is one of our West Rutland systems. One of the things that a person who may not be from Vermont or even that area, what's great is the icons you see. So I'm looking at my left side of the screen, what looks like 2 signs pointing in different ways. That's a trailhead. If they were to hover over that, that would pop up directions to that trailhead so they know how to get there. It may have specific parking instructions. We have several businesses that say, hey, we'd love to be a trailhead. Can you just use the back parking lot? Or some private landowners let us build essential trailheads there. We have a camping icon. And then as you see, those other icons are just promoting other businesses, food, places to get gas, things like that. And every network has this if you were to zoom in. And then at the very top, there's a little Polaris logo. That means that's a dealer that has Polaris items, either machines or, of course, additional equipment, safety equipment to purchase. So we really enjoy this software. The other great thing for us is, again, we manage this in-house. We can go in and change it on the fly. And the person who runs it for Polaris, luckily enough, lives in New Hampshire right next door. So if we ever run into major issues, he's a phone call away and very helpful. And that's our Ride Command app. If the actual trail is open, ready to go, it does a full solid green line. And as I again mentioned, even parts of these can be shut off. So if we had washout or we had unsafe location, we can shut off networks. So in real time, people can travel up, look on their phone and be like, oh, I can't go there today, but this other spot's open. If you get really into it and have a lot of fun, you can even get deeper down and get your road names and trail names that if the clubs have named them. So, but that's just a zoom out. We fully rely on some landowners. The picture to the right was a message that went out thanking our landowners. To the left is a trailhead, but as you also can see, some of our signage that we put out there, the thank you to the members, only stay on the trail, stay home. Of course, thanking our landowners for making it possible is that bottom banner. I did also want to point out the 2 signs to the right. You have the helmets required sign. That was that Yamaha grant the Polaris Ride Command app, that we were talking about. That grant gave us those signs. So you'll see those or standard helmets required with the Vermont statute listed. So we're very thankful for Polaris Ride Command to help support that. And then we have our trail ethic code, which falls in line with Tread Lightly. It takes a lot of those principles. So that's a standard trailhead, what that looks like. And we really appreciate our landowners and do a lot of work to maintain their networks. Here's a quick bit on our safety, a little zoomed in view of the helmets required, thanks to the ride command. But youth riders under the age of 18 are required to take the course. It's recommended for everybody, but the requirement, if you were ever stopped and law enforcement said, do you have all your paperwork? That's one thing. If you're under the age of 18, they will want, there's online or in person. If they do online or in person, just for the knowledge of the room, all the certificates are signed through Vermont State Police. So that's our other partner. It's not listed, but it's not a necessary direct partnership. And with the helmets required, this sometimes gets a little questionable, people, some confusion. So I'm also going to help clear it up. If you're sitting on a stand-atop or sit-atop traditional ATV, need a DOT certified helmet. That is the biggest difference. If you're in a side-by-side, which is the 2-seat or 4-seat, the statute reads sport-related helmet, so it's sport safety. So our thing is you see people who, I mean, I've seen people in full hockey helmets just because they think it's funny, bicycle helmets for the young ones, things like that. For us on the trails team at VASA, as well as myself, I'm a big rock climber. They're lighter helmets, they're airier. We all wear our rock climbing helmets. Those are certified as sport rated in the side-by-side. The biggest concern around helmets is when it always, every once in a while, someone goes, well, side-by-sides are really safe, lots of safety features. Why the helmets? We say first and foremost is the manufacturers tell us the number one injury, if there's any type of accident with a side-by-side, that it's the head striking the safety equipment, the roll cage and that safety thing. It's not because you're going to hit like either pavement, gravel, things like that. It's the actual safety equipment that's reinforced, designed to keep the integrity of the machine. It's your soft head hitting that. So that's why helmets are required. We will always fight that tooth and nail to keep that as a state statute. So here's my little soapbox for that fun part. That's me and my daughter. She loves coming here, even at a young age. So our 2025 legislative priorities, which was the other half of why we were brought here to discuss today, the legal trail conversation with S4 that's going on. We're monitoring it. We did keep very close eye on it. So that's just one of the things that we are keeping an eye on, as it's talked about even this week. H233, which was specific to grants. That's, again, just something we're keeping an eye on. That's always important to us, how grants work, and the way to facilitate those grants is important to us. And one that we actually did physically testify for is the miscellaneous DMV bill. That was, of course, with Senate Transpo. And unless there's any quick questions, will jump to why we came in and discussed the miscellaneous DMV bill.
Great.
All right. So when this session was getting started, we had, of course, some conversations with DMV, as we always do, on things that are coming up, things that are of concern, areas like that, as well as Senator Westman is my senator. So some of those conversations came up, knowing that I'd be in transportation a fair amount with VASA. And that generated a conversation. And one of the things that came up from our conversations with us and DMV and Senate Transpo overhearing was concerns over the ATV statute related to width. So to preface it, VASA as the association, we live by that statute, meaning you have to be a registered ATV in either the state of Vermont or a registered ATV in some state in order to ride our trails. However, that does not mean we dictate what towns do with town ordinances or anything like that. And one of the things that we're hearing, particularly from towns that was of some concern, is that some of these machines are getting wider. And right now, the most recent study on 2025 machines is the average is 65 to 70 inches is the new average of machine, particularly obviously side by side. So these are the 2 and 4-seaters. And so that question was brought to us on our thoughts. So VASA first is that we, again, want to support the statute, support the DMV any way we can, because we need them to provide registration in order for us to take care of our decals. But any changes to that statute, we can do changes as well for our operating procedures. So if the width was to change, and let's say it does get passed and it becomes 72, we can still restrict width based on trail integrity, trail maintenance, all those things at any of our networks. New Hampshire does it, Maine does it, lots of states we've talked to. So that's the first piece. Everyone thinks, oh, that statute's getting changed, that means it's going everywhere. No, not necessarily true. The change from the manufacturers, why they're getting wider, is a safety concern. Is side by sides were showing just through some data that the number one issue they were having was some rollover concerns. And so one of the things that the manufacturers did was looked at, how do we disperse weight? Can we make them a little different? For us, what honestly got us a little bit concerned was, okay, wider machine means bigger machine. That means weight. Weight's always a concern. What we're finding is they're actually creating wider machines that tend to be lighter. We're seeing a change in that. So for us, when the DMV said we'd be okay with 72 as like the threshold, and seeing that 65 to that 70 window is becoming popular, for safety, and a lot of people are buying them thanks to the town ordinances to use them as a way to go from their home either to a grocery store. Great examples, city of Newport. Everyone, when we tell like, oh, come up, you want to see something crazy, see a whole line of them going through the fast food window. It's kind of a neat little thing to see if you're not familiar with that. But when we sat down with the new Commissioner Collier, and did all that, there was no concern on our end for the statute to change because we can handle things in-house. But we agreed, as the people who are dealing with this on a daily basis and working with these manufacturers, the width change is a safer machine. That's their early statistical point. So we agreed to it. Senator Westman just asked us to come in and kind of share that and go through that piece. I'll admit it was way shorter than even what I have here for you all today. So you get to hear this voice a little bit longer than he did. So, but those were the big things with us. And that's really what I had for you today. Thank you all for having me, and I'm happy to entertain questions.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. This is good. Do you get involved at all with towns that want to allow four-wheelers on their roads, and are they connected to your trails, or is it separate?
Yeah, so they are technically separate. While some towns do have legal trail, Newport being one of them, that borderline group, that large group runs primarily through Newport. That is legal Vasta Trail as well. The flip side is they also have their ordinance, as do other towns. We don't get involved. My whole thing, and I've said it with my staff and I said it with my board of directors, it is not our business to engage in town legislative activities and tell them what to do. However, how we do get involved, and it happened this year, is we get called as a resource. And all it is we say, you need to think about the following things. Our biggest things are always law enforcement, maintenance, and do you know where you want these to go? The other history behind that too is if VASA is attached to trying to help open up any type of roadway, it has always been what we call connectors. So that means we want one little piece of road that gets us from this trail through this road to there. The reason why we also don't want to go out after it, there's a lot that goes into it. AOT studies, safety studies, traffic studies, there's a whole host of things. So to long answer, short version, yes, we help as a resource, but we do not engage in those activities. But when they do become open, some groups have gone on to create clubs, and that's kind of how Newport started small, got bigger, and then it became our largest network.
And my second question, I spent some time in Quebec.
Mhm.
They have quite a network.
They do.
Bridges, everything going on. Does your organization connect with them? Are you able to bring your machines up there? Do they have a similar program where you buy a permit?
Correct, they do. None of our trails officially cross an international border. They do skirt it. But we have riders from Vermont that do go over the border to ride. We also have worked with a few of those clubs out there. They have a unique riding season in some of their clubs where they have to shut down at weird points that for us are like our prime season. They have just some different rules depending on their location in Canada. So we've worked, and one of our campaigns this year is to directly reach out to them and tell them the biggest thing from Canada they tell us is that they don't know the proper border crossing procedures. So we're working on a document with them and with us of what a person would need in their vehicle when they're crossing over to say, yes, I'm coming to the United States and all the documents I have are what you're looking for. So we are working on that in hopes to grow some Canadian ridership. We were about 1.8% Canadian riders last year. We're hoping to definitely bolster that.
Representative McCoy? Oh, I got something.
Yep.
Representative McCoy?
So one of your first slides, Maine was not in there.
Correct.
So do they have their own?
Yes.
They must have a lot.
They have a very large network. Right now, also a lot of our folks will ride in Maine as well. They are probably on that list outside of Vermont. There's those 4 states, they're probably 5th. So they're not far off, but we also worked with, they are under their state association. They're governed by their state government. And we worked with their folks and they break it up into regions and things like that. But yeah, they're actually a good study. They do a very good trail health report. So.
Thank you.
Representative White?
Could you just talk a little bit more about the location of the trails? All right, so I saw, thank you to the landowner, so obviously private landowners. Any trails on National Forest Service land or, you know, Green Mountain National Forest, and any intersection with like vast trails or kind of other trail networks that we might know of?
Sure, great. Yes. First, while we are not on National Forest land, we have National Forest roadway that we've done work on that we've been granted, but we cannot exit that and like use the Green Mountain National Forest. Just as we are not on any form of state land. That was one other spot in statute we're not allowed to travel. Where we do intersect with vast is minimal. They have obviously a lot more agricultural land they can access, and they have the rail trails. When we do, usually it's a very good cooperation and proper signage of when their season ends, when ours starts, when our season ends. And excuse me, several of the clubs will do very specific messaging on, hey, our stuff's closing so that vast can get in, do any type of their prep for winter, do the signage. So yeah, they do have that. It tends to be more in the northern section. That's a larger chunk of where our networks are. The other part with some of the heavier road usage like Newport, well, that's not always private landowner. That's an agreement with us in the city. And so we always are in talks with them. That club has always gone to the select board and done updates and, you know, I call it taking the pulse, you know, how's everybody feeling? Do we need to address anything? So yeah, and we do work closely with Cindy and her team at Vast when joint projects can come up. So we had one last year. They ordered a bunch of material, needed some extra help, and we sent our equipment up, and the clubs and us agreed just to share it out. You guys did it, we'll give you our machines, and we worked on some great trails.
It is the most common practice to go to a club, start from there and access trails surrounding a club.
Yeah, so if you were to purchase a trail access decal, the first thing we ask is which club do you want to join? You have to join a club. The nice thing is regardless of what club you join, you get statewide access. But we do tell people, particularly from out of state, you know, which one you'll probably ride the most because they get a chunk of that money. And yeah, most people will do that. The other thing we've done is done club messaging, where clubs will say, hey, we're having a very special ride and a themed ride or a charity ride. And we'll push that out and people then go so they can be essentially escorted around to maybe something that's new. And then we do have a few clubs that have folks in there that are usually of retired age that say, hey, I ride every Thursday. That's good weather. If anyone wants to meet the trailhead, I'll be there and you can follow me. And we've had that happen as well. But yeah.
Other questions? So
I just wanted to make sure, is
you
everybody,
gotta identify yourself. So that's what they do.
Frank Stanley, lobbyist for the Vermont ATV Association. I just wanted to make sure if everybody's clear on the language for the width change. As to what the real, you said it very quickly in the beginning.
Yeah, I did. I probably.
So the issue is, right now it's 64. So if you want to ride your ATV off of your own property, you have to get it registered. You can't get it registered, you can't get a plate, you can't ride on a town road that allows it, you can't join FAST. You could go to a different state to get it registered and then ride it here. You know, if our trails would be wide enough to do, which some aren't, but that's where the mapping comes in and we could tell people that, you know, if your ATV is 72 inches, you can't ride it on the Rutland Trail system. You know, so we have control over who can ride on our trails, how wide, but unless we change it, you buy an ATV that's 68 inches, you go to the DMV, one place might register you, you go down the road 15 minutes, and they'll cross-reference it in the computer and say, sorry, we can't give you a registration, you're not technically an ATV. So I just want to make sure that was clear.
It's appreciated to make sure. So if I understand that then is the way it's written right now, because the widths have gotten wider, the newer ones are too wide and they can't register as an ATV.
So you can
They
buy
want to
it,
make it wider to match what manufacturers are coming out
correct,
with today.
And to be also clear, we are when doing this, we don't have anticipation to go any wider than that 72. You will, in research, find there are plenty of machines that are larger than that, but they're are no reason to be here. They tend to be more your dune buggies out west, and things like that. So this is through when this was discussed, the DMV said, can you give us a calculated approach? And with that, the 72 was the one that we could get where it would not affect too much structurally in our systems if we had to, but also would make it, to Frank's point, that the people who are buying these for the purposes of going from home into town on town ordinance that we don't manage, that would meet the ATV statute. And hopefully with, I know Commissioner Collier has spoken about cleaning up that system of registration and making it a little more user-friendly, this change would help that immensely.
Okay. Your experience would be opposed to this.
Usually anything with width is going to be folks who are near them because there's assumption of sound. There's still a sound part of the statute. So when ATVs go, not only do they create sound from motors, but from tires on either road surface or gravel. But there's no interest in changing that. The other thing through all of our research is around weight. Weight does more damage. There's no change. We do not want to touch the weight issue in the statute. Those machines aren't getting that heavy. And if they are, we don't have business with them. So the people are usually those who are in high traffic areas. So if a town does open it up and they're on a road that leads usually to camps, where people either go to hunt or just to get away from it, there can be a lot of those going and some loud issues there. Then, we will have to, of course, always, anytime there's a change in the statute, we work with our landowners if there are concerns. And to Frank's point, we can make those changes for us and take care of that and respect our landowners in that regard.
How many of your trail networks in the clubs can accommodate this new, if the wider limit was passed?
We've only heard of 2 that have raised concerns out of the 24. And some of that is actual like physical structures, like bridges. That's one. And then one that has a landowner, and we said, well, we would agree to keep it at the landowner's request.
How many towns have freed up access?
The great question that everyone has asked this year when they called. It's a hard one to say in that there's also a difference. Some towns have done all, meaning like if it's not a 50-mile-an-hour or state highway, some have picked and choose. So this year, I know of about, and this is the wrong number, but I know of 20 that have had conversations with us of either adjusting what they have, and then out of the 6 that went to town meetings this year, 4 passed and 2 did not. And the hard part to say was that as one of that passed, like we were talking earlier offline, was that one of those was adjusting and adding a road. So it's really a tough number that nobody really tracks, unfortunately. But one of our things we always put out there is, even if someone's calling the office like, hey, what's a great trail network to ride? And we're like, hey, you should try the Killington area. It's one of the, the favorites. But always make sure in those towns, double check their ordinances. Because if you've got your Airbnb that's not in the trail, you don't want to be having your first experience out on a road that you can't ride, that you should be trailering to. So that number we do anticipate to grow. But it's also, because then the flip side is we've had towns that have also shut off. So it changes annually.
Does law enforcement have a lot of interest in pulling over ATVs or side-by-sides and towns that don't have an ordinance where they let them ride around the towns?
Yeah, so what we've had conversations with would be the wardens first and foremost. And the really positive experience with the wardens is they also all have machines. So they are all trail legal as well. And they'll ride our trails and do a lot of work for us there. They also, I just had a conversation yesterday with Sergeant Reed. She oversees all that. for the priority spots. And we worked on a list of, hey, here's what the towns are telling us are hot spots and things to be worried about. And so we're creating that as priority first. We're going to hit law enforcement right out to these spots that are either, for whatever reason, are seeing an increase in behavior we don't want to see. The other part we are seeing, and it's one thing we always tell town, if they reach out to us, what are the two most important things we need? We need law enforcement first and foremost, and you need law enforcement that knows the statute and what the town is doing. What we are being told is it is one of the things that they just want to keep making sure they're educated with the statute. And so we're very happy as it goes each year, even if it doesn't change, we send it out. Here's the statute. Here's what we look for from law enforcement. And we have great relationships. As I said, the warden service is already, they're eager. They wanted to be out 2 weeks ago because they just want to get in front of all the people who are trying to jump out early. So law enforcement's on board. And then when we do have some towns, particularly some of our sheriffs in the southern and then up in the Northeast Kingdom, some of them actually have their own rigs they purchase through grant money and will either ride the trails and have a good presence. One of the things we really appreciate and we've told groups to do is, as the executive director and the person who oversees all this, I'd be happy if you're either at the trailhead or where a trail meets a road, sitting in your rig, even if you're doing your paperwork. And as you hear rigs come by, have a stop, have a contact, and do all that. That works for us because we just want the presence, and that will hopefully keep deterring more behavior.
There's a clarification on the side by sides. It sounds like right now you can't get registered because of the width. And then at the next breath, you said you're going through McDonald's, so they were doing something illegal then, being on the public roads.
Some can be if they're over that 64-inch threshold. Yeah.
But not in, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but
What's in Newport or?
No, I just want clarification. So this, man, I guess my problem is, I'll be the skunk at the party, is that when we're expanding this width, are we opening up the floodgates for these side by sides to be street legal now, to be on the roads? So they can get registered.
correct. So
That's been a problem down my neck of the list.
absolutely. So it's still in the way the statute's written does not view, because the statute says nothing about the blinkers and the additional mirrors, things like that, which would then be essentially a street automobile. There's that component. What we've discussed was that, that 64-inch and majority of them being 65 was, to Frank's point, we've heard too many times people sometimes caught the right DMV person on the right day and they're like, oh yeah, you have a such and such machine, that's clearly an ATV, and thing gets signed. But then we also don't want to put law enforcement in that predicament if they were to be like, no, we know, because some of them even own these machines, like that's not. And so what we've done is the 72-inch machine's been around since 2014. We know it's we've had some conversation with people like, you technically do not meet the threshold, and we've had to have those conversations around the trail access decals on our end. They're like, well, I'm a registered ATV. And like, but we also know that just because you got through does not necessarily mean it's a good idea for us. So that was part of the conversation as well, is that we want to get everybody on the same page. And when we did open up that, we understood that was going to be one of the bigger concerns. Once you open up the statute, people are going to have either questions, concerns, more likely. And the 72 was what we agreed was like, we do not have interest going past that. And it does cover the majority of the people that have those machines. And really, if you're over 72, just go buy a Jeep and have a car.
But I'm on a motorcycle too, or owner, are they, what's the typical width on a side by side?
So
Your common,
So right now, the traditional 2-seat side by side goes from 2025 manufacturing date, 64 to 68.
So we are expanding, you just kind of.
Yeah.
I think my concern's valid, or at least mine.
Oh, no, I would say, no, I clearly agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
I'm
is.
more confused than I was before. I want to make sure that I understand that.
Frank Stanley again with Massa. I don't think the width of the machine matters when you're going to try to make something street legal. You're basically making it a motor vehicle. Whether it's 64 inches or 72, I don't think it matters. I know down south, people were doing some sort of work to try to get them street legal, and they failed.
Yeah.
It's not really something we support.
No.
And
That's all
I
I'm.
don't believe the width has anything to do with it.
Okay. long as that's the case, I'm fine, but I just wanted to be crystal.
So these riders that are up in Newport in this active club that are going through the McDonald's, they are ATVs. Registered, but they didn't have their stickers, they come off the trail and then go into town, because the town of Newport is, or city of Newport, which has allowed ATV on streets. If they go outside of the city of Newport's limits, they are now, if they stay on the road, that would be illegal, they would be pulled over.
If it is, yes, if it is not either a town ordinance or a VASA trail when VASA is open.
So that they ride on the trail, the city has decided it's cool for them to come into the city.
Yes,
Okay.
and
Whether but the width that they currently are did not impact whether they were able to register as an ATV or not. Or it did, but they were under the limit, they got their registration.
yes,
Now with the larger ones.
Yeah.
By the way, the regulations written would not be able to get an ATV
Correct.
registration unless you happen to hit a DMV employee that went ahead and let it go through.
yeah, Yeah.
Okay, so that doesn't change the idea that they can go ride into certain towns,
correct,
but they're not street legal
correct,
everywhere, only if a city or town, a municipality allowed them to do it.
correct.
Okay.
I guess what you're implying is if I go to register mine, I go to the DMV to register it, nobody comes out and looks at it necessarily. Just like my car, right? And say, here's my car.
Yeah.
Has a VIN number.
Yes, and what was happening was as that DMV software was being updated to essentially add in, new machine, they plug everything in, it should spit out, oh, no, it does not meet stat, things like that. I know that was something, I know Commissioner Collier was really working on that, and we said any way we can help, not that I'm IT, obviously, but, getting that piece, and then the biggest thing was, as for 11 years, they're becoming more prominent, and then the biggest thing from the manufacturers are they tell us, it's a safety piece. That's why we're going to do this. And I said I spoke with someone at Polaris. I said, if I was to even think about changing anything, where is your limit? And they said, well, we technically will do it if people are buying it. I was like, okay, good. So I have to set the limit. We have to be the ones that say, okay, that's for somewhere else. Yeah.
And there's data showing the safety's better, I assume.
Yeah, Polaris has been one of the ones that we've worked with that have worked on the mathematical formula of tipping is really what they were focusing on.
So when the modernization project was going forward, they put all of the laws into the system. They then added the new machine and flagged that it was wider than the law allowed. That's what drove the request to expand the width of what was allowed, because prior to that, because they don't go out and measure, there was no way to really know, they didn't know how wide the machine was at all.
Yes.
But the modernization drove this request.
Yeah.
Because the specs were automated and put into the system. And all the new machine specs would be put in there. And you're saying if you go over this new limit, you're okay with it not being allowed. If a new one comes out and it's 73 inches, you are okay with it being flagged and the DMV employee not giving them an ATV
Correct.
plate.
Correct.
Okay. Yes.
Frank Stanley Bassett, to sum it up as far as where you can ride, you can, besides your own private property, you cannot ride an ATV anywhere in the state of Vermont without a registration plate and permission, whether that's from the town, from the private landowner. Without permission, you cannot ride an ATV anywhere besides your own property.
And on the road, if you're on the road, you have a license.
You gotta have a plate, yeah.
Or driver's license.
And the town has to have approved it. So they give you permission.
Yeah, in our town, not to interrupt, I don't want to interrupt anybody. In our town, you have to have, you get a sticker. You go over to our town clerk, you give her all your, you show her that the machine you want to register is registered and it's insured. And you get a sticker, but still to ride on the road, even though we allow permission, because you're under the guidance of the DMV, basically, because if you're on that road with a car, you gotta have a license, so you have to have a license also. Just with the town issues, not so much as trails, but.
Okay, and now I think I understand it better now, but we'll see. You know, I'm a slow learner, and it's later in the afternoon. Does anybody else have any questions? Please.
I have one more. I wanted to expand a little bit on the opposition when you asked. There's no opposition to date about this change, making it wider. I did check in with Charles Martin before we even started discussions in the Senate. He's the Deputy Secretary of HCA Natural Resources. Asked him to run it up the flagpole, and he let me know a couple days later that he did, and nobody has any issues. So to this point, there's been no opposition.
Now they can regulate, so they have that authority now, so I guess it wouldn't matter too.
I guess I shouldn't ask.
It was just a
My question is Vermont
courtesy.
League of Cities and Towns or other municipalities would have any reason to want to comment on, I mean, or except for this, do they relate this to this town? They have the ability to, obviously they have the ability, as Newport has done, to regulate it or to,
Or to say no, yeah.
okay.
And I mean, we've spoken with VLCT. I mean, they are aware of this conversation, but they have not come back with anything that said they had concerns, but we can easily reach out and ask.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
We always offer if anybody ever wants to go for a ride. let us
It's
know.
4 o'clock and it is, we